Hundreds of millions of people across India tune in to watch the FIFA World Cup. The streets of Kolkata and the tea shops of Kerala fill with fans hoisting massive cutouts of players from Argentina and Brazil, fully surrendering to the biggest sporting spectacle on earth. It presents a fascinating contradiction. How does a nation of 1.4 billion people, harboring this much obsessive passion for the sport, go through its entire history without ever playing a single minute in the tournament? Ask almost any fan, and they will point to a famous story from 1950. The legend goes that India actually qualified for the World Cup in Brazil, but FIFA banned them from competing because the players refused to wear boots. It is an incredibly potent narrative. It casts the Western governing body as an arrogant villain, while framing the Indian team as a proud, defiant underdog holding firmly onto its cultural identity. But while that barefoot rebellion makes for a satisfying tale of national pride, it simply isn't true. It is a comforting lie that has survived for over 70 years, shielding the country from facing a much harder reality about its own footballing failures. The reality is that FIFA never issued a ban over footwear. India only secured a spot in that 1950 World Cup because every other team in their Asian qualifying group withdrew. And then, without kicking a single ball, the All India Football Federation voluntarily pulled out of the tournament. The decision came down to practical logistics. Traveling to Brazil meant weeks of transit and crippling costs for a newly independent nation. The team lacked adequate preparation time, and the federation actively chose to direct its limited resources elsewhere. In 1950, the World Cup did not hold the global prestige it commands today. For Indian football authorities, the absolute pinnacle of amateur sports was the Olympic Games. That was where international dominance was measured. India didn't lose its boots, it lost its focus. The federation missed a historic opportunity on the world stage simply because they didn't realize how important that stage was about to become. What makes that missed opportunity so tragic is that India actually had a legitimate claim to footballing prowess. Under the guidance of coach Syed Abdul Rahim, they experienced a genuine golden era, dominating the continent to win Asian Games gold in 1951 and again in 1962. Yet that early success was highly fragile. It relied entirely on raw individual talent and Rahim's singular tactical brilliance, rather than a repeatable, self-sustaining system. When Coach Rahim passed away in 1963, the momentum went with him. Meanwhile, the rest of the world moved in the opposite direction. Over the following decades, rival nations began treating football development like a nationalized industry. Countries like Japan and South Korea built expansive infrastructure and youth academies. India failed to keep pace. While other countries mandated highly competitive youth leagues, scouted preteens, and integrated advanced sports science, the Indian domestic structure remained fragmented and drastically under-resourced. The national team didn't collapse overnight. It passively faded away over the decades, outpaced by an era where natural technical ability could no longer compete with industrialized, systemic player development. This systemic failure answers the persistent question of how a billion-plus people cannot yield a competitive starting 11. Research conducted by former player development head Richard Hood maps exactly where the country's talent actually comes from. Demographic data reveals a severe geographic bottleneck. Nearly 90% of elite Indian players hail from a handful of small, fringe states like Manipur, Goa, and Punjab. Meanwhile, the densely populated Hindi heartland, home to hundreds of millions, produces virtually zero elite footballers. The math changes the entire narrative. The Indian national team is not drawing from a pool of 1.4 billion people. Functionally, the active talent pool is limited to roughly 250 million. 2014, corporate India attempted an intervention. As this academic paper shows, billions of dollars were injected into the commercialization of the sport, funding broadcasting rights and the creation of the Indian Super League. The goal was to modernize the sport overnight. But this massive wealth was deployed to build an inverted pyramid, an economic model structured entirely backwards. The top of this pyramid is incredibly heavy. It features massive media deals, highly polished television broadcasts, and expensive foreign managers imported to give the professional tier a global sheen. Below that glossy surface, the base remains hollow. While a promising teenager in a European academy will play 40 to 60 competitive matches every single season, a youth player in India's fragmented system is lucky to see 10 to 25. Pouring billions into the highest professional tier certainly creates a profitable television product for corporate sponsors. But without a functional grassroots foundation, it is biologically impossible to cultivate the sheer volume of talent required to build a World Cup caliber national team. The newest generation of players is taking drastic action. They are abandoning the domestic system entirely. A new wave of Indian talent, players like Johan Benjamin, Ishan Pandita, and Akash Mishra, are migrating thousands of miles to embed themselves in European youth academies across Spain, Germany, and Slovenia. They aren't crossing the globe in pursuit of immediate fame or massive contracts. They are leaving simply to access the structured coaching and the sheer volume of competitive match minutes that their own country cannot provide. It is the ultimate indictment of the Indian football ecosystem. To have any hope of competing at the highest level, the nation's most promising athletes must physically flee the country just to learn how to play the modern game. The paradox of Indian football is ultimately self-inflicted. The country's prolonged absence from the World Cup is definitively not the result of a lack of money, a lack of genetic talent, or a lack of passion. The path forward requires stripping away the illusions. The nation must stop relying on comforting historical myths,